What's the coldest temperature you've ever experienced?
Minus 45.
Sometimes goes down to 50 below, you know. That's cold.
People do die in the winter here.
Oh, yeah.
Just from the cold.
Oh, yeah.
It is 34 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.1 degrees Celsius on November the 16th here in International Falls, Minnesota. A place which by every metric is the coldest city in the contiguous United States. But while the temperature will likely dip below -40 in just a couple of months, International Falls is only home to around 5,600 residents. Did you know there's an even colder city just 230 miles northwest of here, which is home to over 800,000 Canadians? Yes, today we're crossing the border to a place which by most metrics is the coldest city in North America. Welcome to Winnipeg, where today, November the 16th, it is a unusually warm 1 degree Celsius or 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Usually around this time of year, the high fails to reach 0 degrees Celsius. Today, the high is going to be 6. And just next week, the temperature will be dipping down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit or -18 Celsius. If you're wondering what the coldest temperature ever recorded in Winnipeg is, however, it was -47.8 degrees Celsius or -54 degrees Fahrenheit back on Christmas Eve, 1879, one of the coldest winters in Canadian history. The temperature with the wind chill, as it's usually quite windy here at the edge of the Canadian Prairies, has gone down to below -55 degrees Celsius or -70 degrees Fahrenheit. That means there's actually a couple of months each year where Winnipeg is colder than the surface of Mars. Now, technically, the coldest ever temperature measured in Canada was -63 degrees Celsius at a place called Snag in the Yukon Territory, but nobody lives there anymore. There are also a few smaller Canadian cities, such as Iqaluit, Yellowknife, and Fort McMurdo, which technically get quite a bit colder than Winnipeg, but with a year-round average temperature of just 2.9 degrees Celsius and a mean January low of -21.2 degrees Celsius, Winnipeg isn't just the coldest Canadian city with over 100,000 residents. It's also the coldest major city in the Western Hemisphere. This street up here is Colony Street. I am currently on historic Portage Avenue, which cuts all the way through downtown Winnipeg. There is the Hudson Bay Company building. Lots of history in this cold, cold city, and lots of bridges connecting the buildings as many people don't want to go out in this extreme cold. In fact, there are 70 days per year where the wind chill dips below -30 Celsius, and there are over 200 days per year where the temperature goes below freezing. But despite the never-ending cold, which makes even Anchorage, Alaska winter seem mild, Winnipeg is actually quite large and growing fast. The metro population currently has 937,000 residents, but it's growing by nearly 3% each year, meaning by the end of this decade, there will be well over 1 million people in Winnipeg. And just looking around, this city is a lot more built up than most cities of just 900,000 people. Like, look at these buildings. These are pretty tall. But as we are entering the downtown area, how about, oh, look at that. The lights start flashing here in Canada to remind you or warn you that the yellow light is gonna come soon. I kind of like that. Wow, yeah, I am heavily impressed by how large Winnipeg's downtown area seems. Bank of Montreal. But although we will return to downtown Winnipeg, our adventure starts where the city of Winnipeg started, right behind this Canadian Museum for Human Rights building. So let's park the car and I'm gonna tell you all about why Winnipeg gets so brutally cold and why nearly 1 million people choose to live here despite the cold. What a beautiful shot of downtown. The beautiful Red River, one of the longest north-flowing rivers on the North American continent, and the main reason that Winnipeg exists and grew to be the large city that it is today. This is the Riverwalk of the Forks Park. If I continue south a bit, I will end up where the very first settlement in Winnipeg started. Across this river is St. Boniface, the largest Francophone community in Western Canada. This here is the Esplanade Riel footbridge, which connects St. Boniface, which used to be a different city, with downtown Winnipeg. This beautiful building, as I mentioned earlier, is the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Apparently, it's one of the best interactive museums, not just in Canada, but in the world. We're definitely going to be going there later. But speaking of that museum and how large the downtown area is here, Winnipeg is a lot more diverse with a lot more amenities than most cities with a metro population under 1 million residents. I'm going to get into the demographics in just a little bit, but there are over 40 museums, dozens of festivals, 2 performing arts theaters, a ballet, an orchestra, multiple concert venues, an NHL hockey team, and an incredible food scene from many different cuisines. And the reason for this is likely because it's the largest Canadian city for over 1,300 kilometers in any direction. The nearest city of over 100,000 residents to Winnipeg actually isn't in Canada. It is Fargo, North Dakota at 360 kilometers or 225 miles away. The nearest Canadian city with over 100,000 residents would be Regina, the capital of Saskatchewan, 600 kilometers west of Winnipeg. The nearest city with over 500,000 residents is all the way down here, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 1,250, my map can't even get the name, there we go, 1,250 kilometers away. And the nearest city with a larger population is all the way over here in Calgary, 1,355 kilometers or a 14-hour drive away. Yes, Winnipeg is extremely isolated. And Manitoba, the province of which Winnipeg is the capital of, is also very interesting in that Winnipeg is its only real city. Brandon, the second largest city in Manitoba, only has around 50,000 residents. And Steinbach, the third largest city, has just 17,000 residents. Meanwhile, 815,000 people currently live within the city limits of Winnipeg. The reason? Because it's actually one of the warmest places in Manitoba, even though I am freezing my butt off right now, but also because of the city's storied history. Winnipeg was once the third largest city in Canada, the wealthiest city in Canada, and those are some massive Canada geese. And to get a little into the history, this waterway has been very important, including portaging around different rapids. Here are some old depictions. The people who first came to Winnipeg arrived by canoes, then York boats, and the first steamboat arrived at Fort Garry back in 1859. The Canadian Heritage River System. So one cool thing about Winnipeg is all of the signs aren't just in English and French, but also in, I believe this is Cree. It's an indigenous language. It's either Cree or Ojibwe. And yeah, the very first fort, which would later become Winnipeg, was established in this very park, the Forks, referring to the fork of the Red River and the Assiniboine. This is a circular area known as the meeting place. This park commemorates the dynamic spirit of human interaction that began over 6,000 years ago here at the junction of the Red and Assiniboine rivers. And I'm gonna go to the confluence of the Assiniboine and Red rivers now. So were you born and raised in Winnipeg, Chris?
Born and raised in Winnipeg, yeah.
So obviously now is considered mild temperature-wise. What's the coldest you've ever experienced?
Man, it gets cold here. Over -40 for sure. You just stay inside. It's a pretty crazy city to live in, guys. I wouldn't recommend coming here.
You're not advertising your city. Can you explain what winter is really like here for people not used to real winter?
What winter's like here? It's cold, windy, just a cold place.
Is the cold the worst or is the darkness the worst?
I guess that mixed in with darkness. It's dark pretty early. Yeah, it's extremely cold here, but you know, the people are good. It's a cool city, lots to do. The people are awesome.
How cold does it have to get before you put on like the down jacket?
Cold? Like a jacket like this?
Like the one I'm wearing right now.
Around this temperature for sure.
Oh, okay, so right now it's actually cold for you. This is
yeah.
Winnipeg's obviously quite remote as well. Calgary will be the nearest bigger city. Do you ever feel like isolated or cabin fever here in the wintertime?
I travel lots. I'm going to Colombia in January, trying to avoid the cold. Yeah, I travel a lot, so try to get as much as I can in the winter.
Do you plan on living in Winnipeg the rest of your life?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But traveling.
Do you always leave every winter, or have you ever been here throughout the winter?
God, no.
You've never stayed a whole winter in town?
No, hell no.
Do you know from other people if there's a noticeable shift in people's demeanor during the winter months?
People are definitely a little bit nicer in the summer. Yeah, you can get the winter blues.
Is the cold the worst thing about Winnipeg, or is there a different thing you don't like?
Yeah, I'd probably say the cold's probably the worst thing in Winnipeg. Yeah. There's some other things.
The cold's pretty bad. You'll admit it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, thank you. Stay warm.
Yeah.
I feel like it gets so cold here that even the Winnipeggers have to just laugh at how ridiculously cold it gets. The entire Red River actually freezes over completely for around 4 or 5 months each year. It's been a warmer than usual November, but normally by late November, this river already has ice forming, and by the end of December, there's enough ice that it's actually turned into an 8.5 kilometer ice trail, which, fun fact, is the world's largest naturally frozen ice skating rink. But if you've ever wondered how I'm able to spew a seemingly endless number of facts in each video, such as the fact that this Johnston Terminal building was built back in 1928 for 135,000 Canadian dollars, it's because I'm always learning and looking up new info on my phone. And that's fine and dandy when I'm in the US using my unlimited data, but my cell provider, just like many, charges ridiculous roaming fees when I travel internationally. So to stay connected while I'm here in Canada, I actually got a Canadian plan with Olafly, today's sponsor. Olafly is a global eSIM provider that offers prepaid data plans for travelers in over 200 destinations, most of which have unlimited data. So as I make sure not to step in that massive puddle, yeah, flooding seems to be a common occurrence here in Winnipeg. But if you ever come to Winnipeg or another country, with Olafly, you never need to worry about hitting costs or finding a physical SIM. So next time you plan on leaving the country, head over to olafly.com or click the first link in the description, search for your destination, pick your plan, and then scan the QR code to be instantly connected. Plus, use my promo code from here to there to save 5% off any plan or top up. But as we are now arriving at the confluence of the Red and Assiniboine rivers, let's go a little bit into the history of why Winnipeg exists. Now, various indigenous groups have met at this exact point for over 6,000 years, including Assiniboines, Cree, Ojibwa, and Dakota peoples. And in 1738, the first European fort, Fort Rouge, was built right here at the confluence by French fur traders. Many French men over the next 100 years or so married First Nations women, and their descendants are now known as the Métis people. Here is the Forks La Fourche National Historic Park, an eagle, fish, wolf, and all other sorts of interesting art. I'm definitely getting the vibe that this is an artistic city. Well, I guess there's some placards here. And again, they are in 3 separate languages. Now, in 1763, this area became British after the 7 Years' War. And in 1809, Fort Gibraltar, which was the first permanent settlement, was built. We're gonna see a reconstructed version of the fort a little bit further up the Red River, but due to all of the snow in the area, these rivers are actually prone to extreme flooding. And in 1826, a flood destroyed the fort. In 1835, Fort Gibraltar was rebuilt as Fort Garry, and some parts of the original Fort Garry still stand today in downtown Winnipeg. In 1867, Canada becomes an independent country. 1870, Manitoba became the 5th province in the then 3-year-old Canada. And then 3 years later, in 1873, Winnipeg is incorporated as a city. So this is Keandra and Naomi. What's the coldest temperature you've ever experienced in your lifetime?
I think with the wind chill, it was probably like minus 45.
Very close to
Very
that.
close
Yeah.
to that,
Close
yeah.
down the schools and the roads.
So schools are closed when it's that cold.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's not safe.
Well, they push the limit. They keep them open when it's really cold.
For people not familiar with winter in these parts, can you explain like how long it is? What are adjustments you have to make?
Yeah, usually by end of October, Halloween, it's snowing already. We've gotten lucky this year, but it lasts like all the way till what, April?
Yeah, you get snowstorms like
March.
mid-April, and then you're just waiting for it to be over. You always have to plug your car in, otherwise it's not going to start. It's got to go in and let it defrost, otherwise your car battery is going to suffer.
But
It's
yeah.
not so bad. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you're not wearing gloves and you have an iced coffee right now. And with the wind chill, it's -6 right now.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, it was like plus 10.
Oh, how cold before you have to put the gloves on?
Maybe like 4 degrees colder than this.
Hey, would you still drink iced coffee in that?
Yeah, iced coffee all year round. It doesn't matter. It tastes
Neg-
better when it's
negative 40, you have iced coffee.
cold. Oh yeah.
Do you guys still do stuff when it's that cold, or you just stay indoors usually?
When it's like really, really cold, we just stay indoors. But when it's like, I don't know, minus 25, we'd still come here and go skating. It has a really nice skating trail. It goes on for like 3 kilometers
This
or
is
something
the
like that.
spot to be. I live like on the other side of the river, and you can hop on the ice on the river and skate all the way down to the forks for like a half hour.
People literally skate to work. Just hop on their skates, head down to work, and then skate back home. It's kind of cool. It's interesting that we have that. I mean, I prefer the warm weather. Like, I'd be fine living in a tropical area, but I've lived here for so long that I'm just used to this by now.
Do you guys plan on staying in Winnipeg your whole lives?
No, probably not.
Because of the cold, or because it's too small? Or...
Yeah, I'd say mostly because of the cold. The reason I think most people stay is because their friends and their family are here. Winnipeg has a very good like community. It's nice, but I would go move to Mexico if I could. Maybe in a couple of years.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'll stay here. My family's here. My friends are here.
And so do you guys get out in the winter months? Travel to Mexico, for instance, or other...
Yeah.
Try
to like
at least
every year.
once during the winter get away, because the sun sets at 4 o'clock and it's really depressing.
Yeah.
It is very depressing.
Winnipeg's also quite remote. Do you ever feel like you're isolated from the rest of the continent?
No, I don't really feel that way ever.
No, Winnipeg has enough to do
There's
here.
so many festivals and things going on all the time. I would consider Winnipeg a city as well. I wouldn't go to Calgary to get something that I couldn't get here.
So everything you need is in Winnipeg?
Yeah.
Okay.
Besides the beach.
The mountains.
Yeah, and the mountains and the ocean.
Is the weather the worst thing about Winnipeg, or is there anything else you don't like about living here?
The crime is pretty bad. You don't feel that safe when you're walking. I go to university downtown, and I do not feel safe really walking from my car into university, because even broad daylight, there's just a little bit of sketchiness going around.
But other areas are nice.
Yeah, you just gotta know where to
you gotta know where to go.
And what do you think the reason for that is, that there's crime here?
I don't know if we have a lot of support necessarily for our unhoused people.
Even in the winter months, they don't have shelter for
There
them.
is shelters, but I've even worked at one of them before, and it's just like, it's not like the nicest. I'm not hating on them, but there's not much support, and they're pretty strict with a lot of things too, so people can't stay there very long if they're dealing with drug addiction. And I think as well, people take a lot of drugs, so they are more numb to the cold and what's going on around them, so you don't feel how cold it is.
Yeah, but people do die in the winter here.
Oh, yeah.
because of-
Just from the cold.
Oh yeah.
They don't have a house, they don't have anywhere to go. We have bus shelters that are heated, but, you know.
So you've just seen like people on the side of the road dead from the...
No, no, I haven't seen that.
Okay.
But it happens.
No, I have not.
Yeah.
Maybe not dying, but have you guys ever gotten frostbite from the cold?
I've gotten frostbite on my toes. Just if you don't wear proper shoes and socks, like your toes will freeze to death. In the winter, you need proper jacket, mitts, 2-cat, fleece pants, fleece socks, totally loaded.
Final question. What's your favorite thing about Winnipeg?
When there are festivals or events that are going on, everyone like shows up. You have festivals like Nuit Blanche or Festival de Voyageurs, where it just feels like you're almost in a whole different city, because now all of a sudden everyone's gathered here, everyone's celebrating, everyone's having a really good time.
Yeah, it's a good time. They also have really good coffee shops.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone you recommend? Or where's this from right now?
It's from Fools and Horses, just inside the forks.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to go in there next. It might not look like it, but the Red and Assiniboine rivers have actually experienced some of the worst flooding in North American history. In 1950, for example, the Red River flood actually destroyed 4 of these bridges, 100,000 different residents had to be evacuated, and there was over $1 billion in property damages. So in 1968, the Red River floodway was built for $63 million. And it might sound crazy, but it was actually the second largest earth-moving project in the world, next to only the Panama Canal. 76.5 million cubic meters of earth was excavated for this project, which is actually more than the Suez Canal in Egypt, just to protect the city of Winnipeg. And it's paid off because in the last 56 years, it's estimated to have prevented 100 billion Canadian dollars in flood damage. Unfortunately, the bridge over the Assiniboine River is now closed, so we're gonna head back and around. Or actually over here is, yeah, this Forks Park is way bigger than I thought it was gonna be. A place to gather. So I'm assuming this is one of the gathering spots. Oidina Celebration Circle goes about different constellations in the sky. Tanis, were you born and raised in Winnipeg?
I was born in Toronto, but raised in Brandon, 2 hours away.
When did you come to Winnipeg?
I moved here 5 years ago.
What was the big reason you moved here?
Time to buy a house.
And it's one of the more affordable cities in Canada?
It is, yeah.
Okay. It's very cold here.
It does get very cold, yeah.
What's the coldest temperature you've ever experienced?
Oh, like close to minus 50 with wind chill.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what does that feel like exactly?
Like it's hard to breathe, like it hurts everything. Like it's very hard to leave your house.
And do you leave your house when it's that cold?
Yeah, still gotta go to work and drive. You know what, in ways it's really comforting. It's nice that you get to go home and you don't really feel like you have to go out. You can just stay home and snugly. I think that's why we've got such a beautiful art scene here, because what else do you do in the winter? So people make music and movies and paintings.
And I've heard the community's everyone shows up at different events. Do you feel like...
Definitely things in Winnipeg where like everyone comes together, and then there's lots of little things that are kind of more, you know, if you're in this area of the city, you go to it type of thing. Places like the Forks, I come every Sunday with my daughter for ballet class, and I get to have my snacks and my coffee. And
Okay. And obviously there's a lot of amenities for a city of Winnipeg's size. What do you think the reason is for that?
I guess there's just lots of people who like to get out. I mean, there's lots of people who have lots of money in Winnipeg.
Do you plan on living in Winnipeg for a while?
Probably, yeah. We're used to Manitoba.
You're used to it, or you really enjoy Manitoba?
A little bit of both, yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind living somewhere warmer, but I do like Winnipeg. It is kind of hard in November because you realize you've got like 6 months to go. You're kind of like, okay, maybe in May it'll stop snowing.
Which is the worst month in your opinion?
Honestly, I find November hard because it's getting cold and it's dark and that time change and there's still no snow, so it's not really pretty. And March is also hard where it's really cold and everything's really ugly. Everyone else in like BC has flowers and we're still under snow.
Winnipeg's quite remote as well for a bigger city. Do you ever get like cabin fever being here?
Yeah, definitely. It'd be nice to be able to, like, it's nice that you can fly to Toronto for 2 hours, but it's hard to actually get out of Manitoba. If you're going to drive somewhere, it's like, oh, Saskatchewan's the same, so.
Do you find that most people in Winnipeg are from this area originally?
I mean, a lot of people do move here, but I'm not sure if people stay here for very long. Move somewhere a little warmer and nicer.
Do you think it's just because of the cold? Like the cold's just that brutal for most people?
I think for a lot of people it is. It wears on you.
Have you gotten used to it?
I have, yeah. I don't know. Every winter's a bit of everyone talks about, you know, this one was mild. We only had, you know, a couple weeks of minus 30s.
Well, I've heard this winter so far, fall has been
so
very
nice.
mild,
Yeah,
right?
this has been great. I'm okay with this.
How cold does it have to get before you like turn your heat on in your house, bring out the down jacket?
Pretty cold. Like I'm still wearing like a fall jacket.
And it's 6 below with the wind chill right now.
Another like 5 degrees, I'll bring out my winter jacket.
Okay.
You do have to be prepared. I mean, I teach kindergarten, so people who come to Canada are not ready for how cold it actually is and that it can actually be really dangerous.
Do any of your kids ever get frostbite and whatnot?
Yeah, even at like recess, they'll come in with little frostbitten cheeks.
Would you say the demeanor of people shifts around this time of year into the winter?
Yeah, they just want to do their thing. No one's like chit-chatting and stuff. Everyone's pretty much like, I'm on my way somewhere. I often come and I sit out here by myself. It's just nice to have some fresh air.
But in like the summer months, people are all chatting all out and about.
People are very friendly in Winnipeg, even in the winter, but not outside in the winter.
Is this from the Fools and something?
This one's from Tallgrass.
Tallgrass. Is that just right in here?
Yeah, it's just inside. It's so good.
Okay.
Got the best cinnamon buns in like the city.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Enjoy Winnipeg.
And that is honestly a great segue for me to go into the Forks Market itself. Forks Market was originally 2 separate horse stables that were built back in 1910 and 1911. They were put together to create this amazing indoor retail space with tons of different restaurants, cafes, boutiques. Yeah, it's a nice little historic vibe in here. Danny all day breakfast and lunch. Oh, and it is so much warmer as soon as you walk in. We'll do a little look around. Fish and chips up ahead. Yeah, beautiful little buildings. So this is one of the horse stables, and then it would be connected with this one right here. New Burger, Simon's Steaks. There's a brewery inside. And then here, Fools and Horses Coffee. This is the Tallgrass Prairie Bread Company. Lots of different pastries. A little gift store, and there's a whole other main section as well. Spiral staircase. And obviously, as we are in Canada, they're not called restrooms, they're called washrooms. They got a little ping pong table in here. And an arcade, wow. Look at that. If you're wondering what the coldest ever month recorded in Winnipeg history was, it was shortly after the city's founding. In December 1879, the average air temperature was negative 26 degrees Celsius. And that winter season, 1879 to 1880, actually experienced 194 consecutive days where the temperature went below freezing. And remember, y'all, I have modern clothing today. This is a down jacket. There's heating in all of these buildings. Back in 1879, people were practically living in forts. And if you didn't chop down enough trees during the summer months to have enough firewood to last the winter, you are probably gonna die. As you can tell by these old train cabs, however, Canadian Pacific Railroad and the Temiskaming and Northern Ontario Railroad, from early on, the railroad was a very important part of Winnipeg history. And just as I say that, it looks like the modern day train is now departing from Union Station. We're gonna walk around to that terminal actually. Obviously the fur trade was the primary reason for European settlements in this area, but after the Canadian Pacific Railway arrived in 1883, the population exploded from just a few hundred in the early 1870s to nearly 10,000. In the 1880s as well, the grain and railroad industries overtook the fur trade, and to this day, Winnipeg is still the grain distribution hub for Canada. Now, this is a pretty cool bridge with all these lit up things. I have to say, although Winnipeg could be a very depressing place, I'm sure, with how cold and long these winters are, they really put a lot of art and color. Now, this building is the Fort Garry Historic Hotel, Spa, and Conference Center. It was originally built back in 1913, and it is a beautiful building, one of the first skyscrapers. And the reason it, as well as many of the other beautiful historic buildings were built is because by 1901, due to the exploding grain and railroad industries, Winnipeg had become the transportation hub for virtually all points west of it. In 1901, the population had grown to 42,500 people, and there were actually more millionaires per capita here than in New York City. By 1905, it had become the fastest growing city in North America. And by 1911, the population reached 136,000. At that point, it was the third largest city in Canada, the richest city in Canada. 24 different rail lines converged here, right here at Union Station. I'm going to cross the street to get a slightly better view. Wow, that is a beautiful street right there. That is actually the Trans-Canada Highway. If I continued west 2,300 kilometers, I would end up in Victoria, British Columbia, obviously with a ferry as well to Vancouver Island. And then it loops around the Forks and goes east. If I traveled 2,300 kilometers in that direction, I would end up in Quebec City, which puts Winnipeg as a central point, at least to the main population centers in Canada. Yeah, I know there's Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and the other maritime provinces, but not many people live there. Most people live between Quebec and British Columbia. Let's cross right here and cross this one as well and show you a beautiful little view of some big buildings up that way, as well as Union Station. Originally built in 1911 by the same architects responsible for Grand Central Terminal in New York, Winnipeg was the rail hub of Canada. But Winnipeg's downtown area is actually quite large, so rather than stay out in this cold for the next hour walking around, I am going to head back to the car. Before we drive around downtown Winnipeg, however, I do want to go inside Union Station here and see if the interior looks similar to Grand Central in New York. Now, until the Panama Canal opened in 1914, Canada's reliance on the rail system actually had Winnipeg on pace to become larger than Toronto at the time. And yeah, this interior, wow. What a beautiful little dome. Via Rail Canada, trains are this way. Welcome to Winnipeg. I have to say, it is so nice how warm it is in the buildings. They crank that heat up. So I guess the Amtrak in Canada is called Via, and you can go to Quebec as well as Vancouver. Look at that. I just talked about the Trans-Canada Highway. You could get there by train. Oh, look at this. So Churchill is the only settlement in Manitoba on Hudson Bay. I want to go there so bad. And the only way to get to Churchill is either by train or by flying. The train is like 24 hours from Winnipeg. But if you guys hit 10,000 likes on today's video, I will take that train. I have always been fascinated by this town that has more polar bears than people. Coming out the backside of Union Station, however, there are some freight cargo containers. So I guess the railroad tracks go over Union Station. One thing I am noticing a lot of in Winnipeg are parking lots. It does not appear to be the most pedestrian-friendly city, and I'm not sure if there's public transit. I think there's only buses. Now, the 1919 Winnipeg general strike, combined with post-war recession, bad labor conditions, and obviously the opening of the Panama Canal just a few years earlier, led to economic hardship, but the city still continued to grow. By 1921, the population was 179,000, but just like every city in North America, the Great Depression really hurt Winnipeg, and the population stagnated for around the next 50 years. In 1971, the population was still just 246,000, but the 1970s were also the decade in which the government funneled a lot of money into the city. Most of these buildings that you see downtown were built then, and Winnipeg also absorbed 13 surrounding cities and towns in the area to create the current city limits. And then the 1980s is when the provincial and city governments really tried to make this a pleasant place to live and visit. This whole Forks area, I guess there's even a skate park, was created during the 1980s. And the population has really only gone up since then. In 1981, the new city limits population was 564,000. And today it is 815,000 and still growing. Yeah, these are some big Canada geese. I don't want to get too close, as I have heard they can be quite dangerous. Oh, there's a lot of geese poop. I got to be careful on where I'm walking. And wow, look at that shot of the Canadian Human Rights Museum and the City of Winnipeg sign. So this is Denis. You're from Winnipeg originally?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I lived on the same city block all my life.
Okay, wow.
72 years.
You're 72?
Yeah.
Oh, you look a lot younger than 72. Wow.
Very nice of you.
For 72 years, you've experienced extreme cold. What's the coldest temperature you remember?
Well, with a wind chill, it sometimes goes down to 50 below. It's cold. You just dress up and go. I have a winter jacket, a long coat. It's made for the north.
How cold does it have to get before you bring that out?
Oh, not so cold. -5, -10.
Okay.
I don't like being cold. People look at me and they say, you must be warm. And I go, yes, I'm not cold. That's the whole point.
Can you explain just winter in general here? How long is it? What's the worst part of it?
Yeah. Well, in the fall, because the days are so short, it's dark. As soon as we get snow, it's going to light things all up. It's going to be really beautiful. That's the great part of winter. Now we get into Christmas and festivities. It's a lot of fun, but as we go along, it gets really long. What happens in January, February is that the snow gets dirty, especially on the streets. They pile it up on the sides. It's got all that sand, tire grit on it. February, March gets depressing, and we're very anxious for it to come to an end. That's when it's nice to get away. Go to Vancouver, say, for a couple of weeks, just to break it up would be nice.
And then when does it end around?
Well, sometimes it drags on. March can be really cold. You might have a few nice days in March and everyone puts away their big jackets, and then suddenly, boom, you get extreme cold again for 3 weeks. It's hard at that time. It's good to keep busy and to have projects just to keep your mind off.
Have you ever had into June below freezing still?
No, but it has happened in the far past. You read some reports about there never being a summer. And I think that was due to volcano eruptions. Now we're getting forest fires, which brings in a lot of smoke, and smoke affects the climate a lot.
Colder or warmer?
Colder.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it changes from the sunlight.
What are some adjustments that you have to make here you wouldn't think about?
When I see people coming in from Africa, we have a lot of Africans in St. Boniface.
Are you from St. Boniface?
Yes.
Oh, so you speak French then?
Oui, monsieur. The Africans are coming from French colonies, so they speak French. I keep telling them it takes a lot of courage for you to come here. I can't give them any advice except just to keep warm and to stay close, huddle to friends and family. You know, if you're warm enough, there's a lot about our activities. The one good thing about Winnipeg is that winter winter, we have a lot of sunlight.
It's the second sunniest city in Canada, I think.
Is it, eh? Well, that's the great part about it. It can be minus 30, but if you're in the sun and if there's no wind,
The wind is the...
wind's a killer.
You mentioned earlier community in the winter months. Are the people here generally friendly and good, would you say?
Yeah, and the Winnipeg has a good artistic community, so there's a lot of shows to distract you from the cold, art shows and concerts. You know, we have a good symphony orchestra.
The famous Canada geese.
It is, yeah. Right now they're going, I guess they're going southwest.
So you're from St. Boniface, is that how you say it?
Oui, Saint Boniface.
Is the French community in Winnipeg really strong and trying to keep the French heritage and language alive?
Well, we're trying to do the best we can in St. Boniface, but with immigration being a real big number these days, children, the new generation is speaking a lot of English. It's not like it was when I was growing up.
So are the schools in English?
No, we have French schools in St. Boniface, and there's also French immersion schools. The quality of the French is really good.
So Winnipeg is quite remote as well. It's the largest city for over 1,300 kilometers. Do you ever feel like you're stuck or isolated here?
Not really, not with the air travel, but if you want to get in your car and go somewhere, you could go to Gimli, you could go to Lake of the Woods, travel around the country and see little towns, but to go to a large town, Regina would be the closest. We are isolated.
If you do leave Winnipeg, you usually fly.
It's less expensive to fly. Gasoline is expensive. You have to rent a motel and you have to eat on the way. It's 2 days away. Regina's one, Edmonton's a couple, Calgary's a couple, 2 days. That gets expensive. And if you want to have fun in the big city, well, spending 3 days on the road is kind of a waste.
Do you know if there's quite a large homeless population here?
It seems to be, there may be homeless people, but like I do a lot of walking along the river paths, and there are a lot of campers. I think they're there because it's a good quiet place for them. I don't think they're suffering. There may be people who are obliged to be homeless.
There's not many people out in the street during the winter months.
There's a lot of people out in the street in all the months. I think it's because they're either not making an effort to go to the resources, or in the good summer months, it's a good quiet place. You can be alone. It's a nice home. You've camped before?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't, you wouldn't consider yourself to be homeless. You're camping.
So during the winter months, the city does a pretty good job of taking care of the people that need shelter?
I would say so. There's a lot of places where they can get clothes, whatever you need to be alive. There's food distribution centers. I think it's as good as it can be, but it is increasing. I see more and more of it.
The economy in Winnipeg is actually quite good from what I read. Do you know what the main industries are here?
Oh my gosh, I don't know what it is now.
Or what was it when you were growing up?
It was textile, and the grain exchange. Textiles was downtown, and there's no more textiles. There may be one or two. I don't want to make a mistake. That's statistics. I'm not good at that.
In your lifetime, how has the city changed?
Much more metropolitan. It's more global. We have all kinds of people coming in with all of their beautiful stories and their culture. It's maturing. I think the main noticeable growth is in the French word is banlieue, the surrounding
suburbs.
The suburbs.
Yeah.
Yes, the suburbs are growing immensely, booming up like mushrooms. When I go in those areas, I'm always surprised by how much it's increased. I wonder who's going to live in all of these houses. Apparently, there's no vacancy. It's just people
Is it people from all over Canada or immigrants or both?
Must be. I don't know.
Do you have any fond winter memories?
Oh, yeah. When you're young, it's so much fun sliding. Look at this beautiful hill behind you. It's full of people. Have you been here in the winter?
No, my first time in Winnipeg ever.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Do I got to come back in February?
Winter's a lot of fun. The entire river is a skating rink. So you can go for miles, skate for miles, and it's family, children being pulled on toboggans and sleighs. There's all kinds of activities outside of the city too. Trails you can walk on. There's a lot of activity.
So obviously you've been here your whole life. You still love the city regardless of the cold.
Yeah, I still like the city, but I find myself saying what my grandfather used to always say when it was getting cold. And he would say, I don't know why my father moved here. Sometimes I say that too. I've always traveled in the wintertime.
So Winnipeg summers, you always like to stay here?
Oh, it's beautiful here in the summertime. Plus, the days are long. You have light at in the true north all night long. It's not dark there. It's dark in the south on that horizon, but not there.
Have you seen northern lights in the city itself?
Yeah, sometimes you see them in the city.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, much brighter, of course, in the country, but I wish for everyone to see northern lights.
I hope, yeah.
Spectacular. I hope you get a chance. Resolute, as a matter.
Oh, all the way up in Nunavut.
Yeah, very short trip, but it was cold. There was a U.S. military aircraft there doing tests to see if the aircraft could withstand the cold. It's of course it's dark. There's no light up north in the wintertime. The light from the flash onto the aircraft and the military guys, it's very eerie. Very eerie. The light seemed green. Scary stuff.
Probably makes this seem very mild, huh?
Of course. Yeah. My suggestion is to go up north as far as you can so you can experience the full 24-hour day. It's really nice. Sunsets are beautiful, right? Well, when you have a sunset that lasts 6 to 8 hours, it doesn't stop. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I am now back in the car, ready to explore a few of the landmarks in downtown Winnipeg. And as we drive over there, how about I tell you a little bit about the demographics of those 815,000 brave Winnipeggers. Now, Winnipeg has the largest percentage as well as total number of Indigenous residents of any major Canadian city, as well as the largest Métis population at around 6.5%. Winnipeg also has the largest Filipino and multiracial populations, and overall it is the fourth most diverse city in Canada. 53.2% of the city limits considers themselves European. 12.7% is Southeast Asian, as we go by Centennial House. A lot of cool buildings here on the main Trans-Canada Highway. 12.4% of the population is Indigenous. 8.5% is South Asian. 5.4% is African. 3.8% is East African. 1.4% Middle Eastern. 1.2% Latin American, and finally 6.9% of the population is 2 or more races. I hope you guys can hear me. The wind is starting to make things very cold, but I looked it up. That is the Manitoba Law Library. It is a beautiful old building, and up here is the Manitoba Legislative Assembly building. This is where the provincial government of Manitoba all meets, as Winnipeg is the capital. Now, this building was originally constructed back in 1920, and yeah, what a beautiful building. Just to the left of it, we have the Manitoba Governor's House, which is where the Lieutenant Governor lives. Now, Canada does their demographics a little differently than the US. Another huge category is the language, as it's obviously a multilingual country. And while French isn't as prominent as it once was back when this was a French fort and everyone spoke French, 10.2% of Winnipeg still speaks French, majority of whom live in the St. Boniface neighborhood. We'll be going there later as well. About 43% of St. Boniface speak French. Next to it is the Canada Life headquarters. It's one of the biggest insurance agencies in Canada. And the hockey arena we're gonna be going to later is actually named the Canada Life Center. Let's see who this guy is on this bust. Robert Burns, from 1759 to 1796, erected in 1936. Apparently he's a Scottish poet, and I can't see anything about him having lived in Winnipeg. I wonder why his statue's up here. But yeah, it's a little wild to me how this Governor's House in Manitoba, where the Lieutenant Governor currently lives, is literally right off the main street. Like, everyone knows where she lives, and there's not really much security. I think that's probably one car of security there. There is a beautiful little gold statue at the top of the dome, I am realizing. And I'm also realizing that the Lieutenant Governor, Anita Neville, probably has the shortest commute in the history of commutes. She just walks out her door and then boom. Cartier, may the new province of Manitoba always speak to the inhabitants of the Northwest the language of reason, truth, and justice. This, of course, is Sir George Etienne Cartier, who was one of the fathers of the Confederation of Canada. He negotiated a lot of the purchases of Western and Northern territories for Canada. And over here we have John Sigurdsson. I wonder why his picture's here. I'm reading online that he was leader of the 19th century Icelandic independence movement. I wonder if there's a big Icelandic immigrant population. in Winnipeg. I know you're probably thinking that this city is just empty, considering it's the largest city in Manitoba and there aren't many people out and about, there aren't many cars parked. I do have to say it is a Sunday today. If this was tomorrow, Monday, I'm sure it would be a lot busier. This building would be in session. Arrête! That means stop in French. Yeah, it is a empty day in downtown Winnipeg. Obviously, family is a big reason many people choose to stay in Winnipeg despite the cold, but another is that it has one of the best income to cost of living ratios. It has by far the best economy in Manitoba, with an average household after-tax income of around 71,500 Canadian dollars. The Canadian average after-tax income is only $60,800. The economy is also quite diverse here. There's a huge aerospace division, finance jobs, advanced manufacturing, insurance companies. There's agribusiness, obviously, with all the farms around Manitoba, tech, life sciences, tourism, and government, as well as education. There are 5 universities in Winnipeg, and overall the unemployment rate is 5.7% as compared to the overall Canadian rate of 6.5%. First takeaways of walking downtown though, streets are empty on Sunday and there are many bridges connecting the different buildings. This building here is the Court of King's Bench of Manitoba, one of the law courts. And then at the other end of this street, this massive overhanging building is the RBC Convention Center. It was built back in 1975 and it is 260,000 square feet, which is 24,000 square meters. Up to 9,000 guests can fit inside at one time. Wow, this is a huge convention center. It's 3 blocks of downtown. I really like how they have all these colors on these bridges. I know it's a Sunday, but I'm guessing downtown is only really used during the workday, or perhaps when there's a hockey game. We're gonna head up to the hockey arena next. I'm walking literally in the middle of the street and there's no cars. This here is National Bank Financial, and that building over there is Wealth Management. So a lot of these newer downtown buildings appear to be from finance. But some additional cold weather facts about just how cold Winnipeg gets. If you don't include all of those frozen tundra cities in Siberia that I have no idea how anyone manages to survive in, Winnipeg is actually the second coldest city with a population over 500,000 residents on planet Earth. Only Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, has a colder average temperature. And in the Western Hemisphere, so North and South America, no other city with over 500,000 residents, over 100,000 residents even, comes close. Yeah, here's the RBC Convention Center from the front. It's actually a pretty nice downtown and it's quite clean compared to a lot of downtowns in the United States. Although I can't help but notice it's a little eerie how empty it is. The longest streak ever where the temperature in Winnipeg never rose above freezing was between November 15th, 1996 and March 11th, 1997, 117 consecutive days. Also earlier that year, from January 18th to February 5th, 1996, there were 19 consecutive days where the temperature went below negative 30 Celsius. I have felt negative 30 Celsius once in my life in Montreal, Quebec, and if you go outside without the proper gloves, you feel the frostbite setting in your fingers in seconds. Of course, these are anomalies, but on average, there are 52 days per year where the temperature reaches below negative 20 Celsius. And it looks like these buildings are a bit older. This is maybe a little look at what downtown Winnipeg would have looked like in the early 20th century. Obviously, it would have been way more bustling. And over here is the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. Founded back in 1939, this is actually Canada's oldest dance company and the longest continuously operating ballet in North America. I know I've been talking a lot about the cold, but ironically, Winnipeg had the 13th highest recorded temperature ever in Canada. On July 11th, 1936, 42.2 degrees Celsius or 108 degrees Fahrenheit was measured. Winnipeg is in the southeastern portion of the Canadian Prairies, part of the Great Plains region of North America. And because there aren't many changes in elevation, if a warm current comes from down south, it can get very hot very fast. And if cold currents come from the north, it can get very cold very fast. Yeah, there are really a lot of those bridges Another thing I've noticed just walking around, there are so many parking lots. Like, this is downtown, this is prime real estate. Yeah, 20% of the lots are occupied by parking. Back on Portage Avenue, where we started the video, that is Portage Place, a big indoor shopping center, mall thing. But while it does get very cold, a day like today with the overcast skies is actually quite rare in the winter. There are 306 sunny days per year in Winnipeg, which makes it the second sunniest overall city in Canada, and 50.6% of total daylight hours are sunny. And because of the extreme cold, it's often too dry for there to actually be precipitation. There's only around 126 centimeters of snow per year, which is about 50 inches. And here is the Canada Life Center, the home of the Winnipeg Jets. Yes, Winnipeg, even though the population is only around 937,000 in the metropolitan area, has a professional sports team. A police siren is off that way. Winnipeg is one of, if not the most dangerous city in Canada. It's the most dangerous, bigger city. But while the Winnipeg Jets are by far the smallest market among NHL teams, they sell more merchandise than any other NHL team. It's a diehard fan base. The seats are packed every single game. And considering it's so cold outside, people need something to cheer about. The last 4 or so people that just walked by me were all speaking French. It's interesting, like, yes, the primary language is English, but how much of a presence French still has here. That is the Radisson Hotel. I'm sure it used to look quite a bit better back in the day. And here is the Canada Life Center from the front. If you're wondering why Winnipeg gets so cold, however, the answer is simple. It's geography. Winnipeg sits in the middle of the North American continent on a flat plain very far from any temperature regulators such as mountains or oceans or even one of the Great Lakes. This gives it an extreme humid continental climate. So if a strong polar high or anticyclone comes down from the Arctic or Hudson Bay, which is actually completely frozen over in the wintertime, there's almost no variation in elevation to stop the wind. So Winnipeg's hit by that extremely cold air and gets extremely cold temperatures. This building is the Holy Trinity Anglican Church. It has been around for 150 years. And this is City Place. Oh, I'm still right next to the NHL arena. And that is a parking lot. If you're like me and used to mass transit in big cities, your first instinct might have been like, oh, there's a subway here. No, parking lot. I want to take you guys by the Winnipeg Art Gallery, which has the largest collection of contemporary Inuit art in the world. As you all have probably noticed by now, Winnipeg has a huge art scene, especially among the Indigenous community here. Altogether, there are over 600 murals in the city. This Kwamajuj, I think is how you pronounce it, is a whole area of the Winnipeg Arts Gallery dedicated just to Indigenous arts. That's this building over there, and then this whole complex is the Winnipeg Arts Gallery. Hobbyism, that's an very cool architecture on that. And I guess right here by downtown, we have the University of Winnipeg as well. I believe this area is the main campus. Yeah, Asper Center for Theater and Film. This is not the largest university in Winnipeg. Only about 9,000 students attend, but it's right next to downtown. It is a little ominous just how empty these streets are. And I can only imagine when it gets to March, April, there's lots of snow, brown, slushy, dirty snow on the ground, steam coming out of all the vents and buildings, long hours of darkness. It must get quite depressing. Welcome to the start of the Exchange District, I believe. Here we have Boston Cummings Theater, one of many theaters in town. We're going to be going to the Royal Winnipeg Theater in just a little bit. But this Exchange District that I'm driving through is the old urban core of Winnipeg. There's over 150 buildings that were built between 1880 and 1920, which are still standing. K's Limited Wholesale Dry Goods. Yeah, that building looks at least 100 years old. This part of town once had most of the financial institutions of Winnipeg as well. There were many banks here, which in the early 20th century gave Winnipeg the nickname the the Chicago of the North. And here we have Red River College Polytechnic. I think there's a few campuses of the Red River College, and it actually has the second highest enrollment of the universities in Winnipeg with around 21,000 students. And over here we have City Hall, originally built back in 1963. Yeah, lots of historic buildings. And then I think this is the start of Chinatown right here. Wow. Look at that. Winnipeg has quite a large Asian community and always has, actually. So many cool buildings. The Manitoba Museum right here. Okay. Yeah, there's so many museums. There's so much in Winnipeg. And then all of these buildings are part of Chinatown. Does not look to be the most desirable location anymore. Now it would be impossible to look up the history of every one of these historic buildings. That is Martha's Studio, which is an art gallery. Here we have the MTC Warehouse Theater. There are many, many theaters in this artistic city. And this is the backside of the Manitoba Museum. The Manitoba Museum is actually the largest human and natural history museum in the entire province of Manitoba. There are nearly 3 million artifacts and specimens in the museum from the province, ranging from the Arctic and Hudson Bay to the prairie grasslands. And then directly next to the museum is the Manitoba Royal Theatre, which is, yeah, there's a lot of sirens in this city, but this theater was built back in 1970, and it has a max capacity of 785. It is so fascinating how many old buildings are in this exchange district. Yeah, some of them have been converted. Some are apartments, some are boutiques, restaurants, etc. But it appears that many of them are just empty. Considering all the sirens we've been hearing, if you're wondering what the crime rate is in Winnipeg, it is 44% above the Canadian average, and the violent crime rate is 61% above the Canadian average. It also has the highest homicide rate in Canada, which is nearly triple the national average. And likely a huge reason why there is so much crime here is due to the high poverty. Now, Manitoba as a whole has a poverty rate of 11.5% as compared to the Canadian poverty rate of 8.9%. But as you can see by all the people at this shelter, and many people who appear to be down on their luck, a lot of people in this city are struggling. This building is the old Canadian Pacific Railway. It looks like 1924, it said. Some more shots of downtown Winnipeg. Yeah, this side of town is just kind of empty. Oh, look at this building here, though. I wonder what this used to be. Holy! That building is completely destroyed. Now, this intersection of Main and Higgins apparently is where a lot of the unhoused people like to hang out, right next to this dilapidated building. Yeah, just looking around, a lot of this northern side of downtown, or I guess the Exchange District, appears to have fallen into neglect. Now, sadly, a lot of the poverty is Indigenous poverty. There's a huge lack of support for programs for the Indigenous communities here. And the funding for social support programs in general has decreased over the last decade, when in reality we should be doing a much better job taking care of the least fortunate. And yeah, on this northern end of Main Street, there have been quite a few homeless people, which is quite worrying for their own sake, especially once winter actually arrives. And it's dangerous, if not lethal, to be outside in these -30, -40 degree temperatures for prolonged periods of time. Our next stop is going to be the Osborne Village neighborhood, just directly south of the Assiniboine River. I'm going to take you around a little bit of the residential there, show you a few homes for sale. But if you didn't already know, Canada has a major housing crisis, perhaps even worse than in the United States. But among major cities in Canada, Winnipeg is actually the cheapest. The average home value here is 374,000 Canadian dollars. It might seem like a lot, but the Canadian average home value is actually $713,000. In the big cities like Toronto and Vancouver, it's well over $1 million. Vancouver is actually $1.2 million for the average home. So yes, for many people, it still is hard to get by. but Winnipeg's affordability is a big reason why so many people move here or choose to continue to live here despite the cold. But yes, let's drive south past the legislature building again. Oh, look at all these guys on camels above Canada Life. And we are gonna cross the South Osborne Steel Bridge across the Assiniboine River. Welcome to Osborne Village. This is probably the most hipster neighborhood in all of Winnipeg. There's lots of live music dive bars, there's comedy clubs, bohemian shops, record stores, cute cafes, into the music. There's a vinyl shop right there. But if you're in that young professional age bracket, mid-20s to mid-30s, this is one of the ideal neighborhoods for you to live in if you can afford it, obviously. There's a nightclub, lounge, patio bar, The Village. I would wonder what the nightlife is like. But then right off of that main drag, we have Corydon Avenue. This here is one of the main commercial streets. We're gonna be driving down it. But first, in this Osborne Village neighborhood, Lord Hart Manor, I wanted to show you a different home for sale. Yeah, that's so interesting how there's these apartment complexes that have, the names feel so secretive. There's a church, I believe. These are interesting roundabouts too. Yeah, that's a Trinity Baptist Church. Right up past it, oh, look at that turquoise house. We have our home currently for sale. It is a 5-bed, 2-bath, 1,800 square foot home, and it is going for $449,000. So let's head back down famous Corydon Avenue. This whole neighborhood was historically known as Little Italy because there used to be a lot of really good Italian restaurants here. Now there still is a lot of good Italian food. There's just also a lot of other great cuisines on this street as well. This street also has a lot of patios and outdoor dining during the summer months, live music in the streets. Look at this, the Stoneware Gallery. Yeah, there's a lot of art. Even on this auto body store, there's a mural. And Tommy's Pizzeria, the Italian heritage that still remains. And if you're wondering what a home in this neighborhood is going to cost you, I'm going to take you up to one currently for sale. It is no longer for sale. Wow, I just looked it up yesterday, it was for sale. Now it is sold. But it was a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2,150 square foot home. Looks really nice in the photos. And it went for $399,000. Oh, and there's this beautiful little park, Enderton Park. Winnipeg appears to be a very suburb-heavy city. Although there also appear to be some mansions. These are some massive, massive properties. But speaking of suburbs, I actually stayed in an Airbnb around a 20-minute drive northwest of downtown. And my host has some interesting stories to tell about the winter in Winnipeg. Jabez, you grew up in Winnipeg.
I did, born and raised.
So what's the coldest temperature you've ever experienced?
Coldest temperature without the wind chill, minus 40. With wind chill, it's probably reached 50 or so.
And how often is minus 40?
It's bound to happen at least once a year. This year, it's still not snowing yet, so we'll see. Like, usually people are trick-or-treating with winter jackets on. It's when we start putting our winter jackets on, once it gets like minus 10, minus 50, since our winters are so long, Winnipeggers eventually adapt. So, in like March, once it reaches minus 10, like that's taking off our winter jackets, just wearing hoodies outside, or some dudes in shorts.
When's the latest that you've still seen below freezing days?
There was one time there was a blizzard in June.
A snowstorm in June?
Yeah, that sucked. I was born in May, and on my birthday there was one time there was like a giant blizzard. Winter tires are a must. Without winter tires, you're slipping all over the place.
Are there a lot of car accidents in the wintertime?
It depends. Not. The thing about Winnipeg is that when we see someone who's stuck in the snow, we usually help them out. Even I got stuck. There were a couple people just around that saw that I couldn't move my car, and we all worked together to like push it out of the snow.
I guess speaking of that, most people are kind of out of their way nice here. Like everyone was waving to me in downtown, for instance.
Yeah. A lot of people say that Winnipeg is a big city with small city vibes. When it's a small town, you know mostly everyone. You're nice to everybody because next thing you know, that person's related to someone that you know.
Do you still have a lot of friends who have stayed in Winnipeg from your childhood?
Yeah, actually most of them. Because the other cities in Canada are pretty expensive. Yeah. Housing in Winnipeg is not bad. There were times I was out with my friends and we wouldn't know what to do because there wasn't much to do here. But if you're with the right people, that's the important thing here.
Is a part of why why you think community is so important here? Is if you didn't have community, it would be not much to do?
I think so, yeah. I am Filipino and have known immigrants from the Philippines that come and move here. And a lot of the times they have no family. And a lot of the times that gets them super down in the dumps. But if you have a solid community, a solid group of friends here, then...
Is it pretty easy for those people to make friends?
I'd say so. You could ask a newcomer over there.
Is it easy to make friends?
It wasn't easy for me to make friends, but when I met people my age at church, that's when I started making friends because we would see each other twice a week and we'd hang out outside church.
So it's kind of a slow burn. Like it's over months to become friends with people.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I've heard it's actually quite sunny here, even though it's very cold. Do you prefer that to, say, Vancouver, where there's no sun, but it's not as cold?
The good thing about Winnipeg, it does get super cold, but at least the sun is out. It does get insanely bright because the sun reflects off the snow. We have to wear like sunglasses during the day.
Oh, really? Okay.
I do have a couple of friends that have moved to Vancouver and Toronto. The main thing they do miss is the sunny winters.
I am currently in the Lord Selkirk neighborhood. It's a pretty typical North American suburb, I would say. It's not one of the more desirable neighborhoods, but the homes here are also a lot cheaper. There are two homes for sale. They're practically right next to each other. This one right here, I guess the front door is boarded up. Interesting. It is a 3-bed, 2-bath going for $250,000, however. And then the next home for sale, this one is 1858 Ross Avenue West. It is a 2-bed, 1-bath, 1,004 square feet going for $185,000. So you can get a home for under 200,000 Canadian dollars up here and still be fairly close to the city center. Oh, and as you can see, flooding is a huge concern. The snow hasn't even fallen yet, and that is a huge puddle. A lot of these storefronts seem to be deteriorating, especially that one right there. This building is the Canadian Brigade. Oh, this is the old military museum. Also on the more suburban side of town, we have many businesses I've never heard of. There appears to be a mall plaza at Polo. Oh, this is the Polo Park neighborhood. Hooters, I have seen recently in the US. This business, however, I don't think I've seen in a decade. Toys R Us is still in business in Winnipeg. Really feels like this used to be a huge manufacturing city. There's a lot of old buildings that remain. A lot of different warehouses on this side of town. There was one cafe near where I stayed open this morning, 7 Coffee. They opened at 9 a.m., so quite a late start as well. But here's some footage of when I went in. It's actually quite a cute cafe. But as we say goodbye to downtown Winnipeg, drive by the Museum for Human Rights, and cross the Red River on the bridge we saw at the very start of today's video. Welcome, bienvenue à Saint Boniface. I know my French accent is absolutely terrible, but as I said previously, this is the largest Francophone community in Western Canada. 42% of St. Boniface can speak French, and 24% of the population's mother tongue is still French. Many of the restaurants and shops here actually speak French when they greet you, and once they realize you can't speak French, they'll switch to English, as most are bilingual. But outside of Quebec, New Brunswick, and maybe Ottawa and Ontario, you're not going to find another French community quite like this in Canada. And this red building right here is the old St. Boniface City Hall. It was originally built back in 1906, and the old historic St. Boniface Fire Hall right next to it was originally built in 1912. You can still see some frost up on the roof there. Hey, how you doing?
My friend got beat up in Norwood.
Oh, what?
Yeah, so he feels like he has to go on into Paul Park and tell people to watch his back because like someone hurt him at the Norwood.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just want to protect Cody because he has housing, has a soon-to-be wife.
I'm not sure what that conversation was about. This is the main street of St. Boniface, however, directly across from the City Hall building, built in 1906, is the post office, originally built in 1907. This side of the river has perhaps even more history than the west side of the river. And there is just as much art gallery inside, although the signage is in French. First sign in French, and then the second one you would read is in English. In 1817, Jean-Baptiste Laguimod and his wife Marie-Anne Gabory settled on Seine River lots granted them by Lord Selkirk. You can pause and read the whole thing, but it's saying the first permanent school as well as mission in the West was in 1818 to 1819. Here is another sign with the French before the English. St. Boniface is definitely a bilingual city, but French comes first. Speaking of the history of St. Boniface, however, the oldest building still standing in Winnipeg is actually in this neighborhood. Here we have the University of St. Boniface building. Université de Saint Boniface. I am trying to say everything in French because this is the lone French language university in Manitoba. And there are currently 1,333 students. It is also Western Canada's oldest university, founded back in 1818. I guess that's what that placard was talking about. Oh, this is the cathedral we saw at the very beginning on the other side of the river. So the current building was built in 1972 as the old one burned down in a fire, but the facade in the front is the original from 1894. And over here on the left is the oldest remaining building in Winnipeg. Welcome to the Musée de Saint Boniface Museum. It is currently closed until 2026 for restoration work, but originally the house was a nunnery, an orphanage, a school, as well as a hospital. It was built back in 1851, and it certainly looks like a house that was built in 1851. Those shutters seem very, very old. A little remnant of the wild Canadian West. When the museum does reopen, it has many exhibits about the Franco-Manitoban lifestyle, as well as the Métis culture and history. And I believe this face here is Louis Riel. He was one of the prominent French people at the start of Manitoba. Wow, look at that Canadian flag flying over his head. The sun is starting to poke its head out over the Red River. And while the modern day city sits atop where the old Fort Gibraltar once stood some 200 years ago, just about 2 kilometers up this river on the St. Boniface side, you can actually see what it used to look like. And that was the worst idea, to come out without a hat, without gloves, without a jacket. I am freezing. Let's get back to the car. I am a bit further up the Red River now. There are certainly tents on the other side of the river. It just makes me wonder, how do these people survive when the severe cold comes? Or do a lot of people die? I am here, however, because this is where Fort Gibraltar, or at least the reconstruction of what Fort Gibraltar would have used to look like. It does not appear to be open now, but I am quite tall. So I'm going to try to see if I can peek over and show you a little of what this historic fort would have looked like way back in the day. Now, obviously, the original fort would have been at the Forks Park, but in the 1970s, during the Festival du Voyageur, one of the largest winter festivals in Canada. It's a 10-day festival. It celebrates the fur trade and French heritage. During that, they decided to build an entire recreation of what the fort used to look like. Now, in the summer months, they actually have actors reenact what life would have been like here in 1815 on the Canadian frontier. Of what I am able to see, it is quite spectacular. Let's see if I can reach over this fence and show you a little down there. It really was a different life. You already have to be so brave to choose to live in a place that gets this cold. But imagine back then, before there were any cities for hundreds of miles in any direction. And if you didn't have enough supplies, you were likely gonna die. And many did die. Yeah, there's a lot of tents actually, right along this riverfront. I mean, it is some nice real estate right along the beautiful Red River. We got a couple ducks in the beautiful city of Winnipeg. But leave a like if you want me to explore more places in Canada. Let me know in the comments any other fascinating remote or cold destinations. And I will see you all back in the United States for my next video. It is -2 degrees Celsius or 29 degrees Fahrenheit the following morning in Winnipeg. There was a frost overnight. And I don't know what it is about cold places, but the sunrises and sunsets, they are just spectacular. And if you didn't believe me when I said Winnipeg is one of the warmer parts of Manitoba, I am currently around 15 kilometers away from Brandon, the second largest city in the province. And as you can see, there is snow already all over the ground.